California has two new laws just signed by Governor Gavin Newsom that has family groups concerned. One requires women's prisons to house biological males who identify as transgender. The other actually creates a fund to pay for transgender treatments and surgeries for minor children. Joining me now is Jonathan Keller with the California Family Council. Jonathan, thank you for coming on the broadcast. Tell us a little bit more about the specifics of these new bills.
Thanks for having me with you today. Unfortunately, this is becoming a pattern in California. We have seen Governor Newsom continuing to do the bidding of the LGBT caucus, largely led by Senator Scott Wiener from the San Francisco area. We've seen bill after bill, this year especially, that is not just advancing so-called LGBT rights, but really going dangerously far into endangering women prisons and endangering minors. As you mentioned, these two bills are just the latest in a bevy of legislation, but I think in some ways they're some of the worst that we've seen in any state this year. In particular, I want to point out AB 2218 would essentially allow minor children to obtain not just counseling, but also puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and potentially even life-altering surgeries, amputations, mutilations that could leave them permanently sterile, all before they turn 18.
On this point of the minors, regarding the minors, do you think there will be pushback from any medical providers over minor transgender surgeries, especially from those providers who are religiously affiliated?
Yes, and in fact, we've already seen a great outcry from people in the Christian community. The Christian Medical Dental Association has spoken out strongly in opposition to this. One of California's great endocrinologists, Dr. Michael Laidlaw, has written some phenomenal articles on this issue. At our website, californiafamily.org, we have talked about the fact that, again, these surgeries are not just hormones, they're not just counseling. In some cases, it's actually irreversible. It is something that would lead to them never being able to have biological children again in the future. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, parents, and especially the minor children, are not being given all the facts. And that's why it's so important that as followers of Jesus, we have to speak out in truth and we have to speak out in love and let them know that this is a dangerous path to walk down.
As I mentioned, one of the new laws requires women's prisons to house biological males who identify as transgender. John, I'm curious, what kind of issues could arise in these female prisons that will now house biological males?
Well, I think as Christians, we should always be concerned about justice. We should be concerned about people who have been convicted of a crime. They are still made in the image of God, and they still deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. The great concern with this bill, SB 132, is that it would allow males, biological males, who only identify, just a self-professed identification as a female, to instead be housed in these women's-only facilities. I mean, we can think of all sorts of tragic things. To my knowledge, and the way the bill is written, there really is no restriction based on the type of crime that the male individual was committed of. You could have people who are molesters, even rapists, that if they just identify, not having to have any physical alterations, merely self-professing that they now believe themselves to be men or allow themselves to be women, they would now be eligible for housing at these prisons. I think it really endangers not only the female inmates, but it also endangers the female prison guards. It really is just, frankly, crazy, and I'm honestly shocked that Governor Newsom decided to sign it.
Jonathan, real quickly, last 30 seconds, are there similar bills being signed and looked at in other states that you know of?
There are, and you can find out a lot more about these at our website, californiafamily.org. We've been tracking all of them in California, but unfortunately, what happens in California often doesn't stay there. It does tend to get exported around the rest of the country. So thanks for letting us on today to talk about it. And your listeners, again, californiafamily.org can find out more.
All right, terrific. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the broadcast. Jonathan Keller with the California Family